There's been a trend in the past few years that I've noticed. If you notice, there are not many places where you can spend paper money anymore. And it's going into identification too, because I know I saw in the news a few days ago that the European Union is trying to phase out passport stamps, physical passport stamps, so everything will be electronic. So that shows that there's going to be a new revolution of digital identity. But have you ever thought of what this means for your business? What is going to change in your business with everyone adopting digital identity? Today, we'll talk about that. This is the Tech Your Business podcast where we break down technology so you can use it in your business to do more and earn more. My name is Peter, and we'll have a guest episode today. And on our episode today, we'll talk to Dr. Paul Ashley. Welcome to the show, Dr. Paul.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be here.
All right. So can you just give us a brief introduction to yourself and what you do?
Sure. I'm the CTO of a company called Anonymity Labs. It's a company we founded about 10 years ago, and it's really a digital identity company. And what I mean by that is more private and be able to interact without, kind of giving all their personal details away. And so we're focused for the last 10 years on different solutions to help people be safe and private online.
All right. So you talked about digital identity. So maybe for the listeners who might be a bit confused about it, can you just maybe explain what it is, maybe with an example or two, so they know where we are coming from?
Yeah, so let's talk about it because it's probably one of the hottest topics at the moment. You see right across the world, people are talking about digital identity, and they're talking about wallets, and they're talking about all sorts of things and credentials and passports that that are now electronic and not physical anymore. So let's go through some history if you wouldn't mind, Peter. I'll just give you a bit of the background. So if we go back to say the 1990s, right, when people wanted to access a service online, there was only one way of doing that. That is to create an account on that service. And that in the industry is called a centralized method. So what you do is you go to the service, like say you're signing up for somewhere, and you give them a username, password. They might ask for two-factor. They'll ask for a bunch of personal information, maybe phone number, email address, credit card information, whatever they need to operate, kind of work with you. And then you're able to work with that service. And that's called the centralized model. And if you look at most people, they have 1 to 200 accounts around the internet, right? And it's a big problem from a security and privacy point of view, because if you look at the privacy aspect of it, because you've got your personal data in all these places, it's all of those places are vulnerable for your data to be stolen or sold. And it's often it's passwords which are, can get phished and do all those sort of things. So we know the history. If you look online at the moment, if you look at any newspaper, what's today's today's attack? That's is it Marriott this week, is it AT&T this week, what is the vulnerability? And you hear 2 million accounts end up in the dark web, and a lot of that is because of this centralized method. Now, back in the 2000s, another method came along, and we're all pretty familiar with this, and it's called social login, or log in with Google, log in with Facebook, log in with Twitter, log in with LinkedIn. And that's what they call a federated model of sign-on. And what happens there is, rather than creating new accounts on every one of these services, you sort of rely on this identity provider, which might be Google. And so when you go to the service and it says sign in with Google, they redirect you back over to Google, you log in there, and then you get a token and you come back to the service. And for the user, one big advantage is you don't have all those passwords to remember. But from a privacy point of view, it's actually much worse than the centralized model, because that service and that identity provider like Google can exchange personal information about you and about your activities without really getting your permission to do that. So although the social login method has been more convenient for users, it's much more privacy invasive. So that lays down the background. But where we are now is into a new phase. I call it kind of the third phase of identity management. And now this is where you start to talk about digital identities. There's a new type of technology which is very disruptive called decentralized identity. You might hear about it being called verifiable credentials or digital credentials. But the fundamental difference is we all start to own a wallet or have multiple wallets, and the wallet is a really key to this. So the idea with decentralized identity is you have a wallet, and in that wallet exists identities, cryptographic keys, and these things called verifiable credentials. And let me give you some examples. So one great example is what's happening in the US at the moment. So if you look at the US, about 20 states in the US will have electronic driver's license by the end of the year. And it's this standard called MDL or mobile driver's license. What happens there, and California has already done this, they will issue you a mobile app, which is essentially a decentralized identity wallet. Into that wallet, they will issue you your digital driver's license. And so the idea here is over time, you won't need that plastic driver's license anymore. You can just use the digital driver's license. And it is kind of far superior from the plastic one. And I'll give you an example. I want to go to a bar. Like I go to the US quite a lot. I live in Australia, but I go to the US quite a lot. And I like to go to the bars in like Salt Lake City. First thing they do is they say to me, prove that you're over 21. I want to see your driver's license or your passport, right? The big problem with that from a privacy point of view is you hand over your driver's license, but it doesn't just have your birth date so they can work out that you're over 21. It has your home address. It says what vehicles you can drive. It says whether you drive, whether you need glasses and all this. So instead of giving one or two pieces of information, you're giving, say, 20 pieces of information to the person who's at the door. And you're like, well, that doesn't feel very nice. Like they now know where I live. And, I had to be a lady turning up at the bar and all of a sudden the bouncer's going, oh, I've got her address now. So it's pretty privacy intrusive, that kind of physical world. The way the digital world works, right, is when you get that digital driver's license, they have this technology called selective disclosure that says when the bar wants to prove that you're over 21 there, what you can do is just say, well, here's my photo from my driver's license and here's my birth date from my driver's license. They're the only two fields that you need. You can see that's me and you can see my birth date. You can let me in. I've the other 18 pieces of information I haven't given away. There's even a better technology than that these credentials have, which is called zero knowledge proofs, which I can say, I'm actually going to prove to you I'm over 21 cryptographically, but I'm not even going to give you my birth date. And so you can start to see now, as you start to interact in the world, it's kind of a much more secure and private way to do that rather than kind of the way we're doing it at the moment. And there's lots of other examples. I can talk about EU if you like, but that kind of lays the foundations, I guess, Peter.
I think that's a really interesting application because I know even in the UK, they're really big on verifying your age before you buy alcohol, especially. So
yes,
I think that's one really, really, really interesting use case because, like you said, you trying to get them to know your age, you end up giving them your birth date, your house address, things that you don't really want out in the open. Sometimes they might even take a photo of your ID and try to use it for something else yeah, or something else. So I think that really explains how it can be used in businesses. And I like how you went through the description, the progression of identity from the centralized to the social login to the decentralized or digital identity, which we are talking about now. So you've talked about the use in maybe age verification in maybe supermarkets, in bars, and whatnot. Do you have any other examples? So maybe business owners can see other ways that this digital identity can relate to them or be relevant to them.
Yeah, so let me talk about the EU. So I said that was the US example. Let me give an example from the European Union. So the European Union has this legislation called IDAS, and in that IDAS, it defines this thing called the EU Digital Identity Wallet. And the idea is every country in the European Union has to produce a wallet. And so, for example, I was at a conference in Berlin recently, and the folks that were coming up with a German wallet had actually, they brought on stage 6 different vendors and said, well, here's our short list. We're going to get down to one of these vendors and they're going to produce the German wallet. So imagine each of the countries in the European Union will have a wallet. The next thing that the countries are expected to do is have a national ID credential in that wallet. So, again, if I take German example, they'll have a national ID credential I think it's by 2026 for every citizen or resident within that country. And so it means by about 2026, they're expecting about 450 million of these national ID credentials to be created and put into people's wallets. Then once you've got that, you're sort of starting a bigger system. And if you have a look at the design of the wallet, it says the wallet must support healthcare. And what they mean by that is that you can go to your doctor, they can give you some information, you can take it in your wallet, and then you can take it to the specialist or the hospital and present it to them. So healthcare is a big example. Education is another big example. And there, if you think about it, right, you go to university, even if you're doing a short course or you're doing a bachelor degree or something, you want something in your wallet that you can present to a potential employer or to another university. Just say you want to go and do your master's degree, you want to be able to present that. So education is the second use case. The third is travel, which we've sort of talked about, is why carry this physical passport? Why get stamps on it? Why carry a visa or get a visa put into that passport? Why even, if you're traveling to India, you've got to get a bunch of vaccines, you've got to prove you've got those. And so those need to go there too. And so what you've got is this pretty complex system. And as you go through the airports, you're sort of showing paper and you've got PDFs and doing all these things, and it's pretty messy. The electronic version is much superior. So the idea there is I've now in my wallet got a passport, and I've got another credential, which might be my visa. And I've got a few other credentials, which might be these vaccines that I needed to get to travel to this country. And so that's another really good example of why this technology is so powerful. But it really does cross a whole bunch of different industries. Like you're seeing it in mining, you're seeing it in farming, and that's for regulated use cases. So I need to prove to the local government what my greenhouse gas emissions are. I'll do that with a verifiable credential. So what you're seeing is this. That's why I say it's a really disruptive technology, because in about 5 years since it started, it's really starting to take off right around the world, and we're all going to see it. Whether we like it or not, we're going to be having wallets within a year or two, and we're going to have verifiable credentials in those wallets that we're going to be presenting.
So from my understanding so far, I think just like on my phones, I have on my Android, I have the Google Wallets, and on iOS, I have the Apple Wallet. So I think it should be, because I put all my cards in there, you can use my NFC and all that to tap. So would this be something like that, or would they probably work with these things?
I'm glad you actually brought that up. It's actually a really interesting point. So most of the wallets that are out there at the moment, there's quite a few out there already starting to appear in the App Store and the Play Store. They're really just mobile applications. So you download a mobile application, and this is a good example again of California. They've produced this mobile application that is a decentralized identity wallet, and you can put a mobile driver's license in it. But there's no reason you can't put other credentials there as well. And as I said, every European country has to produce their own wallet. So there's going to be lots and lots of wallets around. Then you've got this other situation with Apple and Google. I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that's a bit different, because they are actually, if you look at the latest Apple and Google wallets, they already have decentralized identity capabilities to support these mobile driver's licenses. Both of them have already done interoperability testing with each other. And so you go, oh, I can just use my Apple wallet or my Google wallet. And then you think, well, let's start to think about that from a privacy point of view. You start to get all your credentials in this wallet and say it's the Apple wallet. Haven't you now given Apple a really good kind of way to surveil you as all the different things you're doing? So I think from a privacy point of view, I would rather get the German wallet or some company's wallet and use that, because, if they start to surveil you, it won't take long to get in the news, and they'll have to turn all that off, right? When it's in the Apple or the Google wallet, I think it's a bit more undercover. It's in the operating system. Do you really know what's happening there? So I have seen Apple and Google start to add this, mobile driver's license support. And so I imagine they'll start to support all sorts of different credentials. The question for a person is do you really want them to have all of your different credentials so they know all of the things you're interacting with? That's a kind of a privacy decision, I think.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on that, because these companies, they really track a lot that they shouldn't be tracking.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And that's why they want to have you working in their wallet. It's just no different with Google with everything, right? Why do they have all these great apps? And their technology is fantastic, let's face it. And it's free. And why is it free? Because they want to understand your interactions. They want to know where you're going, what services you're using, what your politics is. They want to know everything because then you're a valuable sales point for them.
Yeah.
So it's all about advertising in the end.
All right, so you've talked about the benefits of these decentralized wallets where you can pick what information you want to give out rather than give everything out, how it's mobile, how it's easy to use and verifiable and everything. But what about the risks of this decentralized identity?
I think one of the risks is the one I've just talked about is that people use it for surveillance, and whether Apple and Google will do that, I don't know. That's one thing. I think there's another risk, and I think it's to IAM companies. If you have a look at a lot of the big IAM companies out there, identity and access management companies, right, they've been very much into centralized, then they've moved to federated. But I just went to a conference, I actually went to one in US and one in Europe, and both of them were IAM conferences, and you're seeing a lot of decentralized identity. One thing I noticed is a lot of those IAM companies as yet have not moved over to decentralized identity. And so there is a risk for some of those companies of kind of missing the boat if they leave it too late to jump ship over into decentralized identity. I mean, we're a small company, we're like 100 people, right? We got into decentralized identity about 4 or 5 years ago, built wallets, built a whole lot of technology around that. So we've kind of been going as it's been developing, but I have noticed it's a lot of those IAM companies are still thinking about centralized and federated and haven't yet started to think about this part of the world. And it is a little bit different because you're dealing with just normal people who are on the internet. They just want to live their lives, but they want to do it in a more secure and private sort of way.
All right. So now let's talk about businesses. You talked about these businesses having to being able to verify identities of their customers, of their prospects and all
Yep.
that. But when you think about it, for them to be able to verify these things, that means they should have probably software or hardware that would be able to, yes, access these
Yeah,
details.
correct. And let's talk about the triangle of trust. So there's really three parties here. You have an issuer who issues the
Mhm.
credentials. So in California, it's the driver's license bureau there that issues. So they're the issuer, and they issue the credential to the user, which is called the holder of the credential, right? So they issue that to that. Then, of course, that's like up to this point, it's not very useful. It's in your wallet. You can look at it. The most important thing is that you can present it somewhere, right? So you need
Yeah.
lots and lots of verifiers. So you're 100% right. You need software for being an issuer or a verifier. So that's one of the things we do, for example, is we have a SaaS solution that says, here's, I'm deploying an issuer soft stack for you or a verifier stack. And that issue
Mhm.
and verifier stack, so it's actually pretty complex software because it's got to support different credential types, different what they call credential exchange protocols. They have to support different what they call VDRs, like ledgers, blockchains that are underpinning a lot of this technology. So those issuers and verifier stacks is something, you're right. So if I'm an online, let's say I'm online and I want to sell something and you've got to be over 18 or over 21 to get that, I need to have built into my website a verifier capability so that I can get online the user to present a credential from their wallet to me online. So you're right. There's issuer stacks, there's verifier stacks, and then you've got all the different wallets. So you've got things like enterprise wallets versus mobile wallets, and I can talk about those if you like, what the
Yeah,
difference there
definitely.
is.
Yeah. Yes, to talk about the enterprise and mobile.
Well,
Let's see.
yeah, so let's talk about the business case. So one business case is what you've said. It's just normal users coming in. You want them to present, their driver's license or their passport, or maybe they've even got a discount voucher that you want to present, something like that. But there's the other side, which I call kind of more the regulation side. And I'll give you two examples. So one project we worked on was in the farming area, right? So if you have a look at farming around the globe, they're very concerned about things like how much fertilizer you're using for nitrogen, what's your greenhouse gas emissions, what crops you're growing in different places and things like that. And there's a lot of regulation around it. So you have to either, present to a local government information or to a federal government. So we did a project there with verifiable credentials where, for example, the fertilizer company would issue a verifiable credential to the farm, and the farm would then present that to the local government. So they could say, here's our fertilizer use for the last year. Now, the good thing about that is it's an example of an enterprise case because a farm is an enterprise, right? And they don't want to have their wallet sitting on a mobile device. They want it up in the cloud, somewhere it's backed
Mm.
up, where multiple people can access it. And that's a difference where you can have these enterprise wallets. So we build an enterprise wallet for that use case. And in some use cases, like if you and I are handling credentials, we just use a mobile app. that's on our phone. If I'm a company, another good example is in mining, they've got all the same regulatory requirements. A mine doesn't want to put their wallet on a mobile phone. They want to have it in the cloud where it's protected and where multiple people can access it. So that's what I call the enterprise wallet case versus kind of their personal wallet case.
Okay, all right. So for now, so for the everyday, maybe small business and all that, who will be the what do they call, who will use the mobile wallets, like you said, they'll go more towards
Yep.
the mobile wallets. That means they'll basically from the hierarchy you made, that they'll be verifiers. They would all be verifiers of these credentials. Yeah.
They could be, they're probably both actually. I would say
Oh,
most businesses
issuers.
will end up being both. And I'll tell you why I think it's both, because let's say, you're accessing, an online shopping, right? And the first thing
Mhm.
they might do is say, oh, can you present your driver's license or some information that's in your in your wallet? But it's quite often the example that straight away they want to issue you a credential so that next time you come in, you can present that credential to them. So they might have their own personal credential, might have, you're a member of this group or something. There's some information in that credential that's useful to them. So I actually think, and I've seen this because that farming project I saw, there was only one party that was an issuer, and every single other party was both a verifier and an issuer. So the first thing they do is verify a credential, and then they'd issue a new credential. So I think that most businesses will have to be verifiers and issuers of credentials.
Okay. So when you look at businesses doing this issuing and verifying, don't you think it would be expensive or maybe cause friction for a lot of them trying to adopt this technology?
I think where there's some work is they're going to need to integrate whatever their online store is into that system. So if you have a look at issuers and verifiers, they come with these kind of nice APIs. So from the website, you can call in and say, create this credential for this user, and they can get it and they can issue it. So it's not that complicated from a software point of view, because these services, issuer as a service, I would call it, or verifier as a service, have nice interfaces so you can just drive them from, say, a front-end shopping cart or something like that. So it's actually not that complex for an online store, but there is a little bit of work there, because if you think about it, if I want to issue a credential, right, I need to have the information about you handy, and then I need to have the stack to create the credential and then push it to your wallet. So there is a little bit of interaction there, but because it's sort of a software as a service type solution and there's APIs, there's a little bit of programming interface work to be done, but it's not very complex, I'd have to say.
Oh, yes, I think, yeah, I get that. So using APIs now makes it a lot. They don't need to build a complex software stack, because I know we've used
No,
a service, I think MaxMind or so, for verifying IP addresses and all that. So you just plug and
correct.
open an account, plug
Yeah,
it
you just make
in.
a call.
Exactly.
And
That's
if you
all.
think about most online sites, they're already calling things like Stripe, for things like payments and things like that. So there's sort of, most online sites are used to calling these APIs for different reasons, whether it's identity verification, whether it's for payment, checking credit cards, things like that. And calling this is just another API that you call into and say, issue me a credential for this person, and then it just gets pushed out to your wallet.
All right. So I think now we've gotten that out of the way, because I know a lot of people hearing this might think it's one really big and complex
Yeah,
thing they
yeah,
would
yeah.
have to, yeah. Okay. So what's the main advantage of this? I know you've mentioned some things already, but what's the main advantage of this decentralized identity for small businesses, especially protecting customer data? Because I know my business is registered in the EU, in the UK. So it's covered by these general data protection regulations. I know a lot of in the US, a lot of states are doing data laws. A lot of countries too are doing the same thing. So customer data is becoming a very sensitive
Yeah.
topic.
So I think I'll even take it from a philosophical point of view. I think if you went back 10 years ago, businesses were told, scrape all the information you can, collect all the personal data you can. It's all valuable to you. Get as much as you can. And that was what was
Yeah.
happening. And then what did we see? We saw company after company, after government, after everyone, being hacked and things happening on the dark web, etc. So I think philosophically, I think the ground shifted. I think now, from a small business, medium business, government, only collect what you absolutely have to, minimize it. And I think this is why decentralized identity is really good, because as I said, like you want to present some information to that business, present as small amount of information as possible so that you can do whatever transaction you need to do. And you can have things, for example, identity verification credentials. So the bank, you've gone to the bank and they've done your identity verification, so they know it's you. They issue a credential in the wallet. Guess what? Once you've got that identity verification credential, there's really no reason why lots of other organizations have to do that. Why not reuse that banking identity verification credential? So I think what it does overall is it gives an opportunity for industry to be dealing with less personal data to kind of minimize it and reuse some of the things that are in the wallet rather than getting the user to do the same thing over and over again. I know, like, I don't know if it's the same with you, but every time if I was open any bank account, do any major transaction, identity verification. I've been with my bank for 30 years that I've got at the moment, right? And just in the last month, they asked me to do identity verification again. I'm like, hold on, I've been a customer 30 years. So I think there's a chance now, and I had to give all this personal data across, here's my passport, here's my driver's license, like crazy. And I think what would have been better is I could have just had that identity verification credential in my wallet, whether it's been issued by a bank or by a government or something, and just reuse that. So guess what? You don't need to collect all that personal information. I can prove that I'm Paul, and you can accept it because I've got this cryptographically protected verifiable credential. And maybe I should talk a little bit about why it's so secure. So verifiable credentials are signed documents, right? They're signed by the issuer, and so they're tamper-proof. You can't tamper with them without it being detectable by the verifier and the holder, right? You know whether it's been revoked. So an issuer, for example, can revoke the credential and the verifier knows that. And the verifier knows who issued it. So it's a very strong, from a cryptographic point of view, piece of data that's protected. So when you present it to the verifier, they are sure that that data is valid. So if you, for example, using that banking example, I present my identity verification credential to you, you can trust it. So guess what? You don't have to ask for my passport and my driver's license and all those other things, which 2 years down the track, when you get hacked, you're going to end up on the dark web and you've got all this really sensitive personal information on the dark web. So I think that's, you see, what is the reason why we should all go down this track? And I think it is to minimize the use of personal data, to reuse credentials and make it much more private and secure for users and for businesses.
When you talk about the bank thing, because for business, for personal reasons, I've had a lot of bank accounts opened, and I can't count how many times I've had to take photos of my passport and
I
send
know,
across.
and so I'll give you an example here. So over here, when you do that, the bank or the telco, whoever's done that, has to hold it for 7 years. So we had an example here in Australia where 10 million accounts with passport photos, driver's license photos, all the things all got exposed, right? And this telco here in Australia. And the reason is they had to do identity verification to give you the mobile phone and the SIM. It was fine. But the government had the rule that they had to keep it for 7 years. So guess what happened? Even if you hadn't been a customer there for the last 5 years, if you were a customer ever in the last 7 years, your data was there and it was stolen. So this is the kind of thing why did you even need to do identity verification? Why? And so, these are the kind of things that we've got to get away from, is doing, as I said, what you've done probably multiple times. Passport, driver's license, electrical bills, whatever they want to get to their points. We have like this 100-point system in Australia, and you've got to have like 3 or 4 of these things to get to 100 points. And we've all done it 20 times, and it's very privacy. It's annoying and it's very privacy invasive.
Yeah. So these changes would be, I think they're already in place. They're in the next like 2-3 years. I know almost everyone would be, a lot of places would be using this identity management system. Yep. So what steps can business owners who are listening or watching now start taking today to prepare for these shifts in identity management?
I think it's just to start, maybe just looking for reading about digital identity, or look at articles that say things like the EU digital identity wallet. Look at things like mobile driver's licenses. You'll see that coming. I'm sure it's coming to the UK and Europe as well. Like the US is really taking it on fast, but that standard is an international standard for mobile driver's license. So I assume that's going to be in EU and the UK very, very soon. So I think it's just starting to become aware of it and keep your eyes open, and then look for opportunities to actually be able to use it. Because I think if you're out front and you're issuing and verifying credentials, you're going to have a much smoother track as you go forward. We're all going to see it. Like there's no doubt that this is going to be a worldwide phenomenon. Like the mobile driver's license has been accepted right around the world, even in Australia. So in Australia, my Queensland, that's the state I live in, Queensland driver's license now is an MDL driver's license. I've got it on my phone here. And we had a state election not that long ago, and you could turn up with your mobile driver's license and present it as to prove your identity. So even then, we're starting to see it, and that was an example of, you could either bring your plastic driver's license, or you could actually just bring your phone along, and you could do an electronic presentation of your mobile driver's license. So we're all going to see it. I guess the point is we're all going to see it. So start looking out for it, read articles on it, learn about digital identity. You'll see terms like decentralized identity, verifiable credentials, digital credentials, all these things. They're all talking about the same thing, but they all use slightly different language for it.
Nice. All right. So this decentralized identity, this technology, in the next few years, where do you see it heading? Where do you see this technology heading, and how would it impact businesses? How do you feel it would impact businesses?
Well, I think what's going to happen in the next few years is businesses in particular are going to be affected across all of those industries that I've talked about. Like if you're in healthcare, if you're in education, like if you're a university and in 2 years' time, you're not issuing digital credentials to your students, every time they've finished a subject or done a course, then you're going to be behind the game, because there's already universities starting to issue verifiable credentials into a user's wallet that's about the education experience. So I think if businesses don't sort of get on board, and that they'll find that they sort of get left behind other businesses who are doing it. And it's a point of, if you think about it, the healthcare at the moment, what they say, like if your GP, your doctor, wants to give information to your specialist, what do? They email it, they fax it. What do? Well, what's better is that they issue it to you. You take it over there, and then you present it to the specialist, because you're in control of your personal data. None of these back channels store in databases that get stolen. Let the patient carry that health record with them. So I think there's a lot of advantages here, and I think businesses really should try to come on board. I think to make the most of it, because you can get a lot of advantages out of it.
Okay. So as we're coming to the end, what's one key takeaway that you would like any business owner listening to this episode to go away with?
I think, as I said, go and investigate it. Go and investigate the technology and see how you can use it. Like, do you have an online presence? Is there, at the moment when people create an account on your site, it'll say create a username, password, or it probably says just below that, log in with Google, log in with Facebook. There's actually a third alternative now, which is log in with decentralized identity or digital credentials. And so I think we're going to start to see websites probably have a third option, which is just present me your credential, and then that's the way you're going to log in. No more passwords anymore, no more passwords to manage, none of that two-factor stuff. I know I've got, literally 200 accounts in my password manager. Maybe half of them or three-quarters of them have now got two-factor. Every time I go there, it's like, okay, is that the phone two-factor, or is that the the Authy app, or is it this two-factor?
Yeah.
It's complicated now for users, right? Decentralized identity is much simpler. You just turn up there, you scan a QR code with your wallet. It can ask you to present a credential, and then you're logged in, right? It's more secure, and it's much more convenient for the user. So I think business should start to investigate it. As I said, we have software as a service solutions with issuers and verifiers with nice API interface. So it's not that complex to actually add it to your website, something like this.
Okay. So I think we've had a really interesting discussion. I've actually learned a lot from it, and I'm sure anyone who is listening to would learn a lot from it. So, but for listeners who maybe are curious to learn more, maybe something we've not talked about on this episode, who want to maybe deploy these systems in their businesses, or who want to just maybe find out more about this, these
Well,
decentralized
if
identity.
you could come to if you look at the Anonymy website, we've got stacks of information on decentralized identity, lots of blog articles, lots of white papers talking about all different use cases and the history and some of those things that I've been talking about. So even if you just come to the Anonymy Labs website and have a look there, we've got tons of information on decentralized identity, and we talk about the different types of wallets. There's at least 3 different wallets that I know of, and so just getting an understanding of that, so I think, is really important.
All right. So for every listener, you can go on the website Anonymous Labs. It's going to be on the screen at this point, and it's going to be in the show notes once this episode goes live. So thank you so much, Dr. Paul, for coming on this episode and sharing with us.
Yeah, it's great. And I love to talk about this topic, you can tell. And thanks, Peter, for inviting me. It's really a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you. So for the listeners, did you get any value from this episode? I did, and I'm sure you did. So if you did, please share this episode with anyone who you know it would help, who is curious about this decentralized identity, who is curious about how it's going to impact their business, who is curious on how they're going to get ready to make use of it. Share it with them. And if you want to be the first to know when we post more helpful episodes like this for your business, don't forget to follow, like, and subscribe to the podcast wherever you're seeing us, wherever you're hearing us on. So we have other episodes, almost over 80 episodes on different topics. We have some on this privacy regulations, GDPR data, and things like that too. Till next week, when we are back with a brand new episode, don't forget to listen to those episodes, and don't forget to keep finding new ways to take your business. Bye for now.